The New Tech Times, a video magazine for the electronic age. In this edition, robots at home and in the workplace. Will they prove to be friends or foes? Also, a blind businessman who operates his computer by sound rather than by sight. Later, a commentary from National Public Radio Susan Stamberg, and a look at a video game that can teach you to type. All in this edition of The New Tech Times.
The New Tech Times is brought to you through a grant from Wausau Insurance Companies. Times change. Wausau works.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Johnson. Where is the communications revolution taking us? As the airline pilot said, the good news is we're traveling very fast. The bad news? We don't know where we're going. The New Tech Times is designed to help us cope with the outpouring of things like home computers. And beyond computers? Well, how about a computer that could not only think, but see and move and run errands for you? Science fiction fantasy? It used to be. But now even Heathkit has a home robot you can build yourself with the aid of a 1,200-page instruction manual. An idea whose time's not yet come, I thought, until I found out the company had sold out its first year's supply in 30 days. Reporter Ken Munt brings us up to date on robots in our living room.
You asked for it.
My brain is bigger than yours. And now, Electro, I command you to walk back. Back.
Robots. They've actually been a part of our lives for a long time. The first ones you saw were probably in the movies or on old TV shows. They were a little frightening, but a little unbelievable, too. They became more believable and more frightening when they started taking away jobs. But now a new generation of robots is here. Robots not in the movies, but maybe in our homes. Historian and visionary Bob Malone has had a love affair with robots for almost 20 years.
Robots really started as automatons, which is, self-acting devices. The Persians made them work. They actually created some very simple things. They had water lifters, they had cup pourers and other things, and that was in the 14th century. By the time Europe got itself organized and created their own kind of highly crafted object, the automaton, in the 17th and 18th century, they had these incredible music boxes, watchworks, and other things to work from. And then with the advent of Karl Čapek's play R.U.R., Rossum's Universal Robots, the word robot was invented in 1921. And with that word, suddenly, boom, everybody adopted it. It was a new word in the vocabulary, like Jeep and other things later on, that became a universal word. And then by 60s, people were investigating industrial robots. By 10 years, everybody, it'll be just like television, it'll be just like radio. Everybody will have it, and they'll have it for different reasons. They're not going to all wash windows, they're not all going to vacuum floors. You're going to have robots that do very particular things, manuscripts, you name it. Hobbies, all kinds of strange things.
One place where robots are doing some strange things is the Robotorium in New York City.
See, it's just going to do you can make one little move or you can make a whole bunch of moves. And pretty soon what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to get this kind of a robot, which you can always upgrade. So it'll never
Most of the robots here are only toys. Still, Roboteer and Robotorium owner Debbie Huglin is working on giving her customers what they really want.
When are you going to have something that'll vacuum?
You'll be able to get a traveling base in about a year. You can get linear and XY slide bases right now.
Can I program it to make strings?
Yes, that's one of the main things is it's got what's called a floating hand, which means you can use it to write with or you can use it to carry.
Our domestic crises may not be solved at the Robotorium just yet, though our Christmas shopping could be. But at the Androbot in San Jose, California, they're creating a family of home robots that aren't just novelties.
And you are in the year 1AB.
We currently are working on 4 products. I'll name them for you quickly. I think you'll get a kick out of it. Androman, FRED, which is an acronym for Friendly Robotic Educational Device, Topo, which is a peripheral to a computer, and the topo comes from topography, which means surface or terrain, and Bob, B-O-B, which is brains on board. He will become, as he evolves, the world's first artificially intelligent personal robot, self-contained.
Your humble servant.
Bob, get me a beer. Bob has been programmed to go into the kitchen and get me a beer and bring it to me in my chair.
Let's see if there are any left.
Bob walks and he talks, he sees, he thinks, he makes decisions for himself. He's going to make it as convenient for me as he can. He's going to turn so that the can is facing me.
This Coke's for you.
Bob can't really think, of course,
Very good, Bob.
but as long as you have an Andro fridge and $2,000, he can at least serve beer. Will home robots always be just expensive metal servants? Historian Bob Malone is hopeful that someday they'll actually make us more human.
What it's going to do is it's going to force us to become far more human. What it's going to do is say, just doing dumb work isn't enough. We have to use our brains and our sensitivity to react to each other, to react to the environment, and to learn how to react to this more sophisticated technology. So what it's doing is going to force the entire human race to become more intelligent, more sensitive.
Robots are going to be part of our lives in many ways. The New Tech Times is about you and your loved ones. Tomorrow morning and next week, not some general observations about society or the economy of the 21st century. And yet most of us do spend 1/3 of our time in the workplace, and our efforts as parents and teachers are directed in part to preparing youngsters for work, even if a liberal arts education is the best preparation. But as robots take over the work of everyone from migrant workers in the fields to factory assembly lines to offices, what is the best preparation for the future, for our kids and for the rest of us? The workplace is changing. In Japan, a robot even turned on a factory worker and killed him. So what does the future hold? Well, as reporter Gary Probst found out, it's not all what you might think.
Robots and computers are taking over many boring, tedious, but high-paying jobs. People fear the technology. It removes much of the need for humans. Industrial and government leaders are telling us there's no reason to be concerned. They predict that workers will simply learn to operate and maintain the machines which are taking over unpleasant manual jobs. Wally Schmidt used to earn more than $10 an hour as a machinist. He was laid off for over a year, then took a job for $5 an hour, operating a computer-driven lathe. Schmidt believes computer know-how is the key to higher wages.
This is the future right here of manufacturing, that more and more of your machine tools will be controlled by computers. In fact, I would say in 10, 12 years' time, almost all of them will be. And if you don't have a knowledge of it, don't know how to do it, you're not going to be able to go too many places and get a job in manufacturing. And I think that eventually the wages are going to be equal to what you know. You're going to, the more you know, the more wages you'll be able to make, and you're going to have to know more to be able to run these machines.
Schmidt's hope and optimism are symbolic of the sentiment in his community. Rockford, Illinois is a blue-collar industrial city. Unemployment is above the national average. People want to believe in a bright future. But there's a problem with what we've been hearing about high tech. Economics researchers are now finding that the promise of skilled labor could be nothing more than a smokescreen. Computers are becoming more able to operate without supervision. Within the next 10 years, manufacturing may employ very few people.
We'd been reading the newspapers and listening to TV and radio as everyone else, and had been told that, in fact, high technology was really going to pull us out of this recession and transform the economy into one where there would be a premium on highly skilled labor and that enormous numbers of jobs would be generated. To our surprise, we found virtually no evidence that that was so. To the contrary, we found that to a very large degree, jobs were growing in low-level service areas to a much greater extent than in so-called high-technology industries.
Dr. Levin is a professor of economics at Stanford University. His study of the job market is backed by a report from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. It shows that growth areas will be in low-skill positions. The Labor Department predicts the need for 700,000 new secretaries by 1990, 500,000 nurses' aides, and about the same number of new janitors. In contrast, the government predicts the need for 112,000 computer programmers and about the same number of computer operators. It means that there will be 5 times the job openings for janitors compared to computer programmers.
We now have some estimates due 1995 that don't look very different. We found that about 7% of new jobs would be found in high technology occupations requiring high-level skills.
Meanwhile, in Rockford, people go to a displaced workers center hoping to find a new job. They expect training with computers. Job counselors have to be realistic in helping them to find a new career. The counselors know that most openings will not be in high tech.
We go by what the surveys indicate where the employment is going to be down the line, and using that as a guide, that's what we determine as training areas. So we would avoid sending people into training into areas that don't seem to be where it's going to be in the future.
Wally Schmidt is one of the few people who went through the Displaced Workers Program and found a job involving technology. That does not mean he has job security. Schmidt's manager has a prediction of future employment needs.
Less operators, more automation. As you can see here, with 2 of these machines only require 1 operator now.
Doolin's company is Rockford Dynatorque, a small producer of electromagnetic clutches and brakes. More automation will be needed to keep prices down and the company going. One reason is because larger companies may use high technology to take jobs overseas.
Particularly in Southeast Asia, and I'm not talking about Singapore and Hong Kong, it's Malaysia. And you're talking about a labor force with typically, they're females from the rural areas with 2 or 3 years of schooling. The processes have become so automatic, they've become so self-monitoring that you simply don't need very much intelligence or skill to deal with them.
Dr. Levin believes that American corporations and the government must find ways to prevent the separation of the haves and have-nots in a high-tech economy. Computers could cause the erosion of the middle class. If that happens, Levin predicts violent consequences.
Well, I think that the only way that they'll be spoken for is through the political process. That is, they can't register votes in the workplace if they don't have jobs. And if they get frustrated with the political process and lose faith in it, then you may see some of the kinds of things that we saw in the late 60s, the fires in Watts in Washington, D.C., after Martin Luther King was murdered. And so essentially there will be a challenge to the political system in order to see if it can respond, and if that doesn't work, then we're going to see other kinds of challenges which will not go through normal channels. And my own feeling is that unless we do something, it's clear that those are the directions that movements will take place in.
So what are we going to do with robots? No one has yet come up with some spray that will be equally effective for rodents and robots. Fact is, it's too early in the dawn of the human day for anyone to have yet come up with the answer. But one fellow I've found helpful is Dr. Patrick Dixon. Pat is a professor of child and family studies at the University of Wisconsin and has done research in the kind of lab school in which I grew up. Pat, welcome to New Tech Times.
Happy to be here.
After that last piece, what do you think? Should we train all our kids to be computer programmers or janitors?
I think that's not the right way to frame the question in a way. Surely our country will have more janitors, more clerks, more cashiers than we will have engineers in the future or others working directly in high tech. But I think that argument could be seriously misleading in 2 respects. First, we need to produce a highly creative, highly trained scientific elite to keep our economy competitive. Our janitors and our clerks and our mechanics in Detroit are unemployed today because our engineers cannot think as well as their engineers. The second point is perhaps more important. Although more people will be working in a wide range of service occupations than in high-tech directly, they are citizens of a highly technological country, and their lives can be enriched tremendously by what microcomputers can introduce into schools and into their homes. I think we can look to a future where all of our citizens read better, write better, enjoy it, continue to do art with the computer, generally find education a more creative, more exciting place, activity than it currently is.
So what should the schools do about this? I think there's a lot of confusion now on the part of many school board members and teachers, administrators, parents, some just running out and buying microcomputers and bringing them into the schools. What do you think is the appropriate response?
Well, I think the important thing is to use computers as tools, not to merely teach about them or use them to teach how to spell, for example. We hear of computer literacy programs. Those seem to me to be largely a waste of time in many respects. A child is told this is a disk drive, this is a monitor, this is a keyboard. Children will know those things within 30 minutes of using the computer for some important purpose. So I think schools need computers, as many of them as they can get. They ought to be deployed in a way that children use them as tools for writing, for art, for problem solving, and get a sense of the power that can come from using such an intelligent tool to accomplish something you want to accomplish.
So then rather than using the conventional software for young kids, you think they're not too young in grade school even to begin working with word processing programs and database managers and spreadsheets and the kinds of things that their fathers and mothers are using?
Those are the exciting applications, sort of creative tools, intellectual tools, if you will. And it's certainly not too early to begin doing that in elementary school. My 4-year-old child has been doing some writing on a word processor, and he really enjoys it. I remember my own experience writing in elementary school. It was not an enjoyable thing. You're always spilling ink on yourself and scratching holes in the paper as you erase things. Writing with a word processor can make writing more fun. Children in the future will do more writing and probably will become better writers by virtue of it.
Thanks, Pat. Well, all this technology gives many of us a very uneasy feeling. Talking with someone knowledgeable like Pat can help us, and so can humor. But reason and humor have their limits, and insecurity can quickly lead to frustration. In Frankfurt, Germany recently, a video display worker beat his computer to death with a chair and then set it on fire. National Public Radio's Susan Stamberg hasn't yet gone that far, but she's thinking about it.
My feeling about computers, I feel about computers, I guess the way the Luddites felt about heavy machinery and labor-saving devices. They were a group of men in the early part of the 19th century, around 1811 or so, in England, who went in and used to fairly routinely destroy what were described to them as labor-saving devices. Heavy machinery, big pieces of equipment. From time to time, they were known to burn down factories. They were very nervous about preserving their jobs and holding on to them. In a way, although I suppose I'm not worried about being replaced by a computer ever, I have that same kind of feeling about computers, that maybe if I had a big baseball bat, I could do something about them. And I'll tell you the reason, because I've thought about it. I'm pretty sure that it's because of a kind of anxiety, that it seems to be so complicated. And it seems to be difficult to manage and operate. And I'm going to need special training for it. And it has to do something with math, maybe. And I've never been very good at that either. So all of that sort of gets into me. But I realize, too, that in saying it, I'm slowly leaving behind the modern world, because this is clearly where the future is, and I better learn something about it fairly soon.
The folks I talked to are any guide. Susan Stamberg is speaking for millions. And if you're among them, you're sure not alone. It's a major challenge for employers, educators, not to mention computer manufacturers. I worked with Susan for a number of years at National Public Radio. Still listen to her every afternoon. I'm confident even she would approve of our next segment. It's an inspiring profile about how the new technology can help. Here's reporter Gary Probst.
Ewers has a recording studio in the basement of his home. He tapes music and develops soundtracks for films. Neil has a good ear for music and most everything. He has to. Neil Ewers is blind. In spite of his handicap, Neil has a good business going. Plus, he keeps track of his paperwork with a computer. Now, it's easy to understand how he can mix music on tapes even though he's blind, but how can he operate a computer? He lets the machine talk to him.
I press a particular key. Here, the disk drives whir, know that they're whirring correctly or incorrectly, and know as a result of sounds that I'm doing something I should do or something I shouldn't do. And if
Neil's hearing is finely tuned. He can sometimes troubleshoot problems with a program. He's learned the logic and has memorized the keyboard. He can't depend on a video display screen.
I do a lot by sound. I don't have a lot of modern technological conveniences that allow me to hear speech synthesized output. And as a result, I'm probably better off if I were sitting here at the screen and typed some characters in and the speaker said, "Error, press return to begin program all over again." I'd simply press return to begin the program all over again and really wouldn't know a heck of a lot about what I had done to cause the error. So I have to know a great deal about the logic of the computer, how it works, and the logic of the program that I'm using. In this case, I met with success.
There's a lot of competition between recording studios in Neil's community. He needs the computer to keep tight books. It helps him to use his time wisely to produce profits.
It has allowed me to look at market research. It has allowed me to print into the computer all the various kinds of jobs that I do and decide how much money I make on them, whether my price is too low or too high relative to what other people make for the same job. You get to the point where you can program those kinds of things into the computer and ask it certain questions that are relevant to your business and to how you can maximize your profits.
The computer also gives Neil a better sense of being an independent businessman.
It's allowed me to type up the computer invoices. If somebody comes in to purchase something, I will type up a bill for them right on the spot, which until I had the computer I couldn't do. I had to wait till my wife or a secretary came and printed off the invoice and mailed it out to them. This way they get it right at the moment, and I have the satisfaction of knowing that I have done it without having to bother somebody else to get it done.
As uplifting as that story was, it still had to do with work. And we don't want to conclude our program without a little play. Games are part of our lives after all, and the technology has changed both how we learn and how we play. And sometimes the two can even go together, as our game reviewers Dan Gutman and Michael Blanchet explain.
People say video games cause brain damage, and video games are turning our children into mindless zombies.
That may be true, Michael, but they can also teach kids how to spell, how to read. They can teach history, geography, and just about anything you'd want to learn.
Most of today's kids grew up with television, so it makes a lot of sense to use the TV screen to help them learn. And since a computer's most common input is a keyboard, what could be more natural than to use a computer to learn how to type?
This is a game called Type Attack by Sirius Software. It looks sort of like Space Invaders. You rest your hands on the keyboard and you shoot the appropriate letters out of the sky before they hit the ground. So rather than being punished by staying after school or standing in the corner, in this game it's simple. You type or you die. In this sequence, words fly across the screen and you've got to type them out as fast as you can.
You can also set the game to practice with the left hand or just the right hand, vowels, consonants, or numbers. At the end of the game, it gives you your typing speed.
Educational games like Type Attack make learning an interactive experience, and it's fun at the same time.
Whatever you may think of video games, that's not all there is to our New Tech Times. The same robot that brings you a beverage can also bring you an unemployment notice. And as Pat Dixon told us, you can spend hundreds of dollars on a home computer and end up bringing home nothing but disappointment. The anxiety that Susan Stamberg spoke of, it's very real. We all need a guide to help us through these problems. And we hope that's what this video magazine will prove to be for you. That you'll be here with me for the next edition of the New Tech Times.
The New Tech Times has been brought to you through a grant from Wausau Insurance Companies. Times change. Wausau works. For discount information and your free copy of How to Buy a Home Computer, send $1 to The New Tech Times, 821 University Avenue, Madison, Wisconsin, 53706.